The international system is entering a period of uncertainty not seen since the end of the Second World War. Conflicts are raging in Europe and the Middle East. Trade wars are pitting the world's two largest economies against each other. Amid this global turmoil, diplomacy is seeing its stock rise. Here at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, I sat down with Turkey's Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz. I asked him about the state of the world and the risks and opportunities that could reshape our future. I'm Yusuf Aram, and you're watching One on One. We're on the sidelines of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, and joining me is Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz. Part of his responsibility is overseeing the Turkish economy. Mr. Yilmaz, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, from ADF to ADF, we sit down and have talks. It's kind of become a tradition. And before we get into the economy, I want to ask you about Antalya Diplomacy Forum. What are your thoughts about this organization?
Very critical organization, actually. We are going into interesting times. Many things are reshaping in our region and at the global level. So we need to talk more, actually, not less. And we need to talk with multiple actors, different geographies. So this Antalya Diplomacy Forum became a very big, important platform for assessing and also reconsidering our policies in this increasingly uncertain world, actually. So when you look at the participation, it is close to 7,000 participants all over the world, more than 150 countries. I believe this forum will serve to its purpose of shaping a secure and fairer future for all of us.
Yes, definitely. I mean, in the 4 years that I've been following this forum, and it is 4 years old, it's getting bigger and bigger, more guests, more inclusive, more encompassing, and it's definitely becoming the premier forum of the region. Now, the Turkish economy,
yes,
this is the biggest part of your mandate. Let's begin with what's the current state of the Turkish economy right now? Are you feeling comfortable with where we're at?
We are going through difficult times at global economy. In our region, there are, of course, lots of conflicts and that have effects on economies. And also we went through the worst earthquake of our history, and we are in a recovery process. And since 2023, we are implementing a strong economic program to stabilize our economy. Number one priority for us is reducing inflation, actually. Turkey has done quite good in terms of growth, job creation, exports, tourism. I mean, in this real economy front, Turkey has done outperformed actually many of our comparable countries, and we have grown above world averages over the next 2 decades, for example. But the issue now is stabilizing our financial markets, reducing the rate of inflation. And since last year's June, this disinflation process has started in Turkey. It is going on. Since then, we have seen more than 37 percentage point decrease in inflation, but still it is around 38 percentage, the rate of inflation. So we will continue with this program in a decisive and coordinated way. All our respective institutions, ministries are working together. We have an economic coordination board. We come together and coordinate our policies, which has 3 dimensions actually. One is monetary policy, the second dimension is fiscal policy, the third one is structural reforms. So we have a comprehensive program. President Erdogan has put strong political support under this, behind this program, and we also prepared this in a participatory way, and we are communicating with different stakeholders, so there is also social ownership and business ownership for this program. We will continue to implement it. But from time to time you have external developments that affect your program, you know. It is normal, I mean, it happens all the time and everywhere. What is important is the overall framework of the program and your decisiveness to implement it. So far as you have this decisiveness and you know what you are going, what direction you are going, the rest will be temporary effects. I mean, positive or negative, but they will be temporary. What is important is the main direction of the program.
There's a lot of external shocks, and we're going to talk about that
Yes.
later in the interview. But now you stated that price stability is definitely your number one
Yes,
priority. Are you expecting some type of austerity measures or fiscal tightening to continue, or will there be some fiscal easing? How much are you thinking about economic growth versus price stability, and what type of sacrifices would you be willing to make on that?
Actually, this discussion can be done for the short term. I mean, in the short term, there are certain trade-offs between stability and growth, and what we have formulated in our program is a balanced growth, actually. I mean, the composition of growth is very critical. It is not only the level of growth, but also competition of growth.
Where it's coming from.
We have more moderate growth rates, and also our growth is more balanced now. That what I mean with balanced, I mean with internal and external demand. I mean, we want to export more. We want to grow with external demand so that our growth will not be inflationary. On the other hand, I should also emphasize that when you reduce inflation rate, this is also increasing predictability. It is increasing the investment climate, confidence in the markets. So decreasing inflation is also a sound ground for sustainable growth, for growth in a secure and predictable environment. So in the medium term, there is no trade-off between reducing inflation and increasing your growth performance, employment performance. So far, our program is going with a balanced growth, with job creation, and also with a clear path of disinflation, and we will continue in this direction.
Okay. So I want to talk a little about the medium-term economic program. From what I understand, you want to see more sustainable and more predictable growth going forward.
Right.
Now, last year when we talked, the medium-term economic program was about half a year old, and we were able to evaluate it. It's been 12 months. When you look at the targets in the program, whether it be inflation, whether it be FX rates, growth, unemployment, are you comfortable that Turkey is meeting its targets? What are the strengths, and where do we need more improvement?
We are definitely going in line with our targets, but that doesn't mean that you always have 100% realization in your targets. What is important is, as I said, is your direction. Where are you going? In which direction you are going? When you look at our growth rate last year, our target was 3.5. The realization was 3.2%. So close to our target. When you look at, tourism revenues, external balances, current account balance, for example, we are beyond our target there. The current account deficit is less than 1% last year. So it is quite outperforming our targets, and this is in a positive way. But in inflation, we have we are above our targets actually, but the direction is in the right way. I mean, it is we are reducing inflation with different internal or external effects. You may have a month, 2 months delay in some of your targets, but as I said time and again, what is important is your overall policy framework, your overall direction, and we are going in the right direction almost in all macroeconomic figures, and more or less they are in line with our targets set in our medium-term program.
I want to talk about external shocks. Now, I think the master of external shocks, new US President Donald Trump, tariffs, everybody's talking about it. Some 10%, some 25%, some countries 50%, and even more. Before we get into the tariffs, have you had an opportunity to talk with your US counterpart yet about these issues?
Actually, our commerce minister, he will meet with his counterparts in the coming period and negotiate this new environment. So we will have this negotiation and dialogue with the US. It has been an important, of course, change in the whole trading environment, atmosphere globally, with this new tariffs announced by the US president. But of course, this is a dynamic process. I mean, on the one hand, the President Trump is announcing tariffs, but on the other hand, he's saying that we are ready for negotiations. So we have to closely monitor this process between the US and other actors, especially China, EU, Japan, and many other countries. We need to see the end result of this negotiation process, because it is an interactive process and nobody knows what will happen at the end. And at the same time, we need to follow the reactions of the other countries vis-à-vis after this new tariffs announced by the US. If there is a retaliatory action from different actors like China.
Would Turkey take part in the retaliatory? Would Turkey take
No.
part in the conciliatory, or will Turkey blaze its own trail?
As you know, the tariffs announced for Turkey is the baseline one, the lowest one that is announced. So Turkey is relatively in a better position.
Definitely, it looks like that.
It looks like, and we are open for negotiations. We already have a balanced actually trade with US. When you look at the numbers, last year it was about 30 billion, close to 35 billion US dollars, and more or less balanced between Turkey and US. So we basically don't have this issue of unbalanced trade volume with US. But we have ambitious targets. Our leaders, President Trump and President Erdogan, in the first term of President Trump, they have determined a 100 billion US dollar target for Turkey and US, a big trade volume. So this may also be an opportunity for us to renegotiate this $100 billion target, and how can we achieve it? Of course, with a win-win approach. Turkey is always ready for discussing these issues and find ways that will be a win-win for trade partners.
Well, Erdogan and Trump, close personal relationship. They're always praising each other. So it looks like when they get together, they'll probably be able to solve the bilateral problems pragmatically. Now, there's also been talk of a US recession. Have you factored that in as a possible external shock? How would that impact Turkey?
That is a big discussion, of course, on these issues. But as I said, we are at the beginning of the process. We don't know yet what will be the end result. So we should closely follow and make impact assessments. In this morning, I had a panel, and in this panel I have underlined that we cannot follow autopiloted policies in this period. We should be very dynamic in assessing the developments and reposition of ourselves according to the developments. So this is a very dynamic period, very unpredictable period. There are uncertainties. We should closely follow this. But when you look at the analysis all over, people see the probability of recession higher than a couple of months ago. But whether this will happen or not, we should closely follow the results of these new policies. The sooner we have these negotiations finalized and more predictable environment, the better for the economy, of course.
You must have a drawer with like a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan
that's
Z.
Right. That's right.
It's a tough job. I want to get into Syria because it was a major paradigm shift in the region. A lot of impact on the economy. Obviously, almost 4 million Syrians in Turkey over the past 10 years. That was a big economic burden. How has the liberation of Syria impacted the Turkish economy? And what type of role do you expect Turkey to play in Syria in the rebuilding process?
First of all, President Erdogan has done a big historic job actually. He didn't, concede to populist pressures. He protected the millions of Syrians from dire consequences in the past, and now we have a different environment in Syria. We have seen this revolution in Syria. A long-time dictatorship is gone, and Turkey, now we are supporting a inclusive governance in Syria, covering all religious groups, ethnic groups, sects, and we want to see more secure and prosperous Syria. But this is not easy, of course. We need to see new institutions set up, a new political atmosphere, and also recovery in the infrastructure and economy of Syria. As a neighboring country, as a brotherly country to Syria and all Syrian groups, we will do everything possible in our capacity to support Syria in its search for more stability and prosperous future. And we call upon, of course, international community to leave the old sanctions. These sanctions are meant for the old dictatorship, for the regime. But now people are suffering from these sanctions in their efforts to rebuild Syria. So I believe one of the most critical issues is these sanctions. US and Europe in particular need to lift these sanctions and prepare the environment for a growing and more prosperous and more secure Syria. This is in our best interest actually as a neighboring country. We have suffered a lot from migration, from security issues, from terrorism, Daesh, PKK and other security challenges. But now a secure and more prosperous Syria will be in our best interest indeed.
Do you see big opportunities for the Turkish economy, especially Turkish businesses in Syria? Is there a risk appetite where they want to be doing business in Syria?
Actually, when there is a recovery in your region, in your neighborhood, of course it will be beneficial for your economy as well. As I said, a stable Syria will be in our best interest in multiple ways. In security-wise, the security of our borders, in terms of terrorism threats and our stability. And also, as you said, the whole country needs to be rebuilt actually. Roads, infrastructure, cities, ports, and everything needs to be rebuilt actually. And when you look at Turkey's entrepreneurial capacity, technological capacity, construction capacity, that will of course generate multiple opportunities for our companies.
Have you talked about this with your regional counterparts, say the Qataris, the Saudis, Emiratis? Because they seem also very interested.
Actually,
there's been a lot of meetings going on throughout the region.
We are calling to everybody, Europe, international organizations, neighboring countries, and encourage them to help Syria to rebuild itself. Turkey is doing this, and we are calling all other partners to do the same actually, to work together to rebuild Syria, because Syrian people have suffered a lot actually from a dictatorship, from an internal conflict, from migration, and now is the time to help Syrian people to rebuild themselves. You know what? Syrian people are very entrepreneurial people. They have great civilization. They have built multiple civilizations in history. So I believe with reasonable international support, Syrian people themselves, they will rebuild their country with their own efforts actually.
I want to talk a little about the war in Ukraine as well. Now, 3 years ago when the war started, it really impacted Turkey from a financial perspective, from a banking perspective, from a logistics perspective, also bilaterally at $30 billion in trade with the Russians. That was growing every year. And Turkey had to make a lot of adjustments, especially under the Biden administration, which was very heavy on the sanctions, very pro-war, supporting the war through military aid to Ukraine. 180-degree shift in US policy now with Trump. If peace is negotiated, and obviously the Turkish president will play a big role in that because he's been very hands-on, what type of impact is that going to have on the Turkish economy? That's got to be huge, positive for you.
Definitely. We have always been for peace, not only because economic reasons, for humanitarian reasons first and foremost. So many people lost their lives, so many, problems of, migration, etc. So we are neighbors with Russia and Ukraine. We have strategic relations with Ukraine. We have good neighborly relations with Russia. President Erdogan have excellent communication with both President Zelensky and President Putin. So we want to see our neighbors in peace and security. And this initiative by new US administration is welcome for us, and we hope it will be successful. First generating a ceasefire and then a permanent, of course, peace and stability in this region. And as a Black Sea country, Turkey has done a lot actually in this process. We try to bring these parties together. You cannot solve the problem with speaking to one party. You have to speak everybody for a solution, for a diplomatic solution. President Erdogan has managed this grain deal, for example, in the past, an exchange of wars of prisoners, etc. So in this new period again, Turkey will do its utmost to help this process to help the process of reaching a ceasefire and then a permanent, of course, peace. I mean, a temporary ceasefire will not be enough. The parties need to negotiate the basic issues and generate a ground for permanent peace. And then, of course, we will have a new region. And both Russia and Ukraine would increase their, efforts for rebuilding their economies, rebuilding their infrastructure. They will focus on economy rather than war and other issues. So that will also be a very positive environment for the regional economy and of course for our economy, for Turkish economy.
There's some irony in both of us talking about war in Ukraine here at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, because 3 years ago, then Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba met the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov here at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum.
Right.
That's been the biggest breakthrough between Russia and Ukraine.
You know what? Not only like-minded countries and people should speak to each other. What we need in today's world, I mean, the countries that are in conflict, that have problems, they need to talk. Otherwise, you cannot solve the problem. So, Antalya Diplomacy Forum last year had done this historic, job, and I hope today's processes will also succeed to bring these parties together and reach a diplomatic solution rather than, conflict and war.
Yeah, as a journalist, I always enjoy participating in this forum because it gives us a lot of access to a lot of officials from different geographies. One last question, Turkey's relationship with the EU. Now there's been a big shift in the way the EU and Turkey view each other lately, especially with new paradigm shifts in security. That relationship looks like it could be restarted. Now I want to ask you from an economic perspective, which is in your responsibility. Now there's a customs union that needs to be modernized, visa liberalization, bilateral trade with member states. Obviously reheating or restarting the accession process, that would be positive. What are you looking at right now going forward, at least in the next year or two with the EU, that could be positive or could be a risk for the Turkish economy?
Europe is facing both important security and economic challenges actually. When you look at security issue, this Ukraine-Russia war was big, security challenge for Europe, and still Europe is discussing about the future of European security. I myself participated to the meeting in France, in Paris actually. Mr. Macron has called European leaders and President Erdogan to discuss about the future future security of Europe, and I represented Turkey in this meeting. I can clearly see that there is a big discussion in Europe for solidarity, for a common security and also common economy. It is Ukraine, Russia when we talk about security, but it is US and China when we talk about, economic challenges for Europe. So Europe is under these both pressures, security pressures and economic pressures. And in both fronts, I believe we have common interest with Europe. And a closer cooperation between Europe and Turkey is a must for a more secure and more competitive Europe. So I believe with this new atmosphere of dialogue and higher level, leadership level dialogue and dialogue with other levels will bring Turkey and Europe closer. And we need to focus on positive agenda for Europe. As you mentioned, I mean, renewing customs union is one topic, but there are lots of others. I mean, from energy to migration, from new trade policies, investment policies to technological, cooperation. There are lots of topics to be discussed between Europe and Turkey, not just security issues. So I believe this new era is providing an opportunity for a better and more positive relation between Turkey and Europe.
Before I let you go, one more question, a quick take. The BRICS. Now, Turkey has a warming relationship with them, a growing presence in Eastern economies as well. What's your view on the BRICS? How is that relationship going to move forward? Is it going to be stronger? Is the US's pressure going to make it weaker?
As I said, there are uncertainties actually. Definitely we live in a multipolar world. We don't live in a unipolar world or bipolar world of the Cold War. So we have a multipolar world. There will be different economic security organizations. What is important, I believe, is in this multipolar world is to generate multilateral rules and more fair, global governance. President Erdogan is always calling for this. I mean, the world is bigger than five. What he tries to, underline is the need for a more fairer global governance, from the United Nations institutions, Security Council, to the economic setup of the global order. So we need to see more global fair structures. But as Turkey, we are part of NATO, we are a candidate country for EU, but at the same time we are in dialogue with all the rest of the world, because it is not a must or even a necessity to just look at one side of the relations and ignore others. So Turkey has relations, has dialogue with all of the world, with Africa, Latin America, Far East, but it is clear that we are a member of NATO and we are negotiating for full membership for EU.
Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for making time for TRT.
Thank you. All the best.